A critical development is surfacing within the official investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The sheriff offered a single detail, a fact he stated once and would never repeat. It was not about the designated suspect, not the DNA analysis, nor the reported sighting of a masked figure at the residence. It was something far more granular, a technicality, seemingly designed to be forgotten. And yet, this may be the most pivotal piece of information in the entire case file. Once you understand it, you cannot disregard its disturbing implications. And it presents a question that remains unanswered in the official record. Why was this detail never pursued? The evening of January 31st began with the rhythm of routine. Nancy Guthrie had concluded dinner with her daughter, a perfectly ordinary evening. Nothing to suggest a deviation. She utilized a rideshare service to return home. Investigators subsequently located and vetted the driver. The assessment was clear: no anomalies, no unusual behavior. At 9:48 p.m., the electronic sensor on her garage door was triggered. At 9:50 p.m., it closed. And according to the official timeline, this is the point they presume she retired for the night. A presumption, not confirmed, not visually verified, based only on the automated closing of a door. From that moment, the electronic record goes completely silent. But it is within this very silence that the initial theory of the case begins to fracture. At 1:47 in the morning, a new event is logged. The video feed from the doorbell camera at her primary entrance disconnects. This became the focal point of the public narrative, the framework everyone accepted. The camera feed is cut. The perpetrator makes entry. Nancy is removed from the scene. A simple sequence, deceptively simple. Because within that same public statement, the sheriff revealed something else, a detail that provoked no further inquiry. He stated that the camera system lacked an active subscription. And then, the subject was changed. No follow-up questions were asked, and no clarification was offered. So, let us analyze that statement with forensic precision. Because a camera without a cloud subscription does not merely cease to function. It doesn't freeze its last captured frame. It doesn't store a final image for later review. It continues to run on a perpetual loop, recording and overwriting, and again, each new second wiping away the last, systematically annihilating its own evidence in real time. The implication is that whatever unfolded that night was never intended to be recorded, not because an individual erased the evidence, but because the system itself was designed to destroy it, and that single fact alters the entire investigation. Now, we enter a more deeply unsettling phase of the analysis. Investigators have confirmed a detail that most observers overlooked: the photograph of the masked individual that the Bureau circulated. It was not captured on the night she was taken. It was from the preceding day. The subject had already been present at the location, positioned at the same door, staring into the lens of that exact same camera. And that fact introduces a question that is psychologically impossible to dismiss. Was he aware of the system's flaw? An operative who understands these surveillance systems can discern their state. The behavior of the indicator lights changes. There are subtle shifts in response times and motion trigger sensitivity. It is a nuance, but to a trained eye, it is unmistakable. And our subject was not an individual acting on impulse. Subsequent intelligence points to gloves, a holster, a backpack, evidence of methodical preparation and planning. Therefore, it is not an unreasonable line of inquiry to ask: was the camera's inherent weakness a feature of the plan, or was it simply the perfect coincidence? Because if he possessed that knowledge, then this operation wasn't merely calculated, it was surgically precise. And that leads us directly to the portion of the timeline to which investigators are completely blind. The missing 41 minutes from 1:47, when motion was initially detected at the door, to 2:28, when the victim's pacemaker activity abruptly ceased. 41 minutes. That was the entire window. No visual evidence, no acoustic data, no record whatsoever, only a void. And every piece of information we have about this case materializes after that void. The gloves discovered miles from the scene, the DNA, the vehicle reports, the subsequent ransom communications, all of it surfaces only after her physical presence was already secured. This means the most critical component of this entire case is shrouded in complete invisibility. That truth isn't just professionally frustrating, it is profoundly unnerving. But before proceeding with the analysis, there is a critical piece of context to consider. We are not looking at a mere timeline. We are examining a life. The subject is Nancy Guthrie, age 84. She resided alone in a home that had been her sanctuary for decades. Her life was governed by routines, by predictable patterns, such as church every Sunday morning and dinner with her family on the weekends. A quiet existence, meticulously built on consistency. Her well-being was contingent upon daily medication. Physically, her mobility was severely restricted. She was not an individual who could mount any significant resistance, and that very routine, that unwavering stability, may have been the precise factor that rendered her a target. The chronology does not conclude with those 41 minutes. It extends into a far more disturbing territory. At 2:28 in the morning, the signal from her pacemaker ceases transmission. After that, there is only silence until 12:03 in the afternoon. That is the moment the 911 call is finally placed. 9 hours and 35 minutes. That is the duration that elapsed before her absence was even registered. No alarms were activated. No security system flagged an anomaly. It was her non-appearance on a church live stream, an event she religiously attended, that triggered the initial concern. Consider the implications of that. The perpetrator operated with a window of over 9 hours before anyone was even aware. 9 hours to establish distance, to travel, to vanish. This does not present as a random act. It feels meticulously timed. Investigators then unearthed a detail that fundamentally alters the timeline once more. They made inquiries, requesting surveillance footage from neighbors for two highly specific dates, January 11th and January 24th. Both were Saturdays. Both were mornings times when Nancy would have been inside, adhering to her established patterns. This is not coincidence. This is an observation of behavioral patterns, which points to an even more unsettling hypothesis. An unknown subject had been conducting surveillance, not on one occasion, but repeatedly. They were studying the residence, learning the rhythms of the household, and identifying the precise windows of her isolation and the moments her absence would go unnoticed. This was not a spontaneous act. It was a methodical build-up. Model. Let us consider the architecture of the event in its entirety. A surveillance device rendered impotent, incapable of retaining what it observed. An individual of interest who conducted prior reconnaissance of the location. A 41-minute void in the timeline, followed by a 9-hour delay. A lapse before detection, preceded by weeks of systematic observation. The confluence of these elements does not suggest random circumstance. It indicates a meticulously crafted operation. Every contingency was seemingly anticipated, every vulnerability identified, every weakness leveraged. However, even the most disciplined operative cannot control every variable. Biological evidence was successfully recovered. Yet, it produced no matches within the national database. The implication of this is singular and unambiguous. The subject who penetrated that residence has no prior felony convictions on record, or, more accurately, none that required their inclusion in the system. But this does not render them a phantom. Forensic genetic genealogy, the very methodology employed by authorities like C.C. Moore, has resolved investigations with significantly less material. That forensic process remains active and is currently underway, which leaves us, weeks later, contemplating the same fundamental inquiry. What is the current location of Nancy Guthrie? It's possible the answer lies outside the parameters of conventional evidence, not within the DNA profile, not in the suspect vehicle, nor the captured image of the subject. Perhaps the solution resides in the anomaly everyone else has dismissed: a simple, overlooked service subscription. A camera that was physically present but functionally blind. Because if an individual possessed that knowledge, if they engineered a plan around it, then that fact ceases to be a minor detail. In that context, that small detail is not insignificant at all. It becomes the entire linchpin, and the operative question is who possessed this critical piece of intelligence.